So, this is a question you may be asking. How do I know if religious programming is still negatively impacting my life? You've left the church physically. You do not associate with any religion. However, if you have not done the emotional work, if you have not done the rewiring that is necessary in your identity for you to now rediscover your sovereign identity, if you haven't done that part, then yes, religious programming is still operating in your life and you don't even know it. But don't worry, Tamara Tamu is here. You have come to the Unleashed Alchemy YouTube channel. And in this video is the first part of a series that I am starting where I'm going to give you signs, okay, on how to know that religious programming is still operating in your life. This series is not for you to fret. This series is to put you back into your sovereign place to know that you can do something about it. Okay, so let's get into the first sign. So, how do you know when religious programming is negatively impacting your life? Is if you find yourself constantly undergoing self-interrogation. I'm going to give you some examples of what that looks like. So, self-interrogation comes up and it's associated with chronic guilt and shame. Okay? Religion teaches you that you are inherently bad, that you are somehow broken, and that you must be born again. Okay? And then after you become born again, depending on what type of church you went to, the type of churches I went to, born again meant that you were baptized. Literally, the ritual of being dumped in water. You put on a white sheet, okay, and then, or a white robe, and two people baptize you in water, and then you come back up and you are born again, and then you have to receive the Holy Spirit, okay, with the evidence of speaking in tongues. Some of you are familiar with that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That born again experience can look different for whatever church that you went to. Okay, I'm just using my experience. But the point is, the religion as a system teaches you that you have to do something else to show your worth as a human being, to show that you're worthy to be here on the earth. Okay. And then after you go through the ritual of being born again, then you have to spend the rest of your life living in a way that is right, so that you don't piss off a God that's staring down at you, ready to pounce on you if you do anything wrong from the sky. Okay? So, even after that born again rule, that born again ritual that you go under, you take on the identity of a person that is a sinner saved by grace. We all are familiar with that phrase. You are taking on the identity that you're still a person that is broken, that constantly needs to be fixed over and over and over and over again. The songs that are sung in church don't help. The messages that the preacher says he or she has been called to give by God, those don't help either, because it further reminds you of your false brokenness. Okay? So, what do? While you're attached to this religion, you live your life to please, again, something out there. And so you only take action if you are told that the God out there is pleased with it. Okay. So what does this do? What does that identity, what does living with that consciousness, what does that do to your psyche? What does that do to your nervous system? What does that do to your identity? It leads you to constantly question yourself after every single decision that you make. Not either, but here's a few things that can happen. You'll either question every decision that you make because you're not taught to trust your intuition at all, or you will not make a decision. You will become completely still and frozen because, again, you're waiting on this God out there somewhere to give you the green light, to give you the thumbs up, to say, yep, you're good today. You can go ahead and take that action. So there's a few things going on there. And this identity plays out even after you have disassociated with a religion. So you're watching this today, and I'm talking to you. If you find yourself constantly questioning, did you say the right thing? It could be in the most mundane action that you'll take throughout the day. I'll give you an example. Say you're being introduced to someone. You're sharing who you are. That person is giving their name. And constantly you are questioning, well, did I speak up? Did I say the right thing? Did I appear nice? Was I nice enough? Did I acknowledge the person? Did I do this? Did I do that? Was I dressed appropriately? It's a slew of self-interrogation that happens. So, did you say the right thing? Did you do the right thing? Did you make the right decision? Did you move to the right house? Did you move to the right city? Did you move to the right country? Maybe you shouldn't have said that. Maybe you should have said that. Did you introduce yourself properly? Did your voice project? Did you talk too loud? Did you say too much? That is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about self-interrogation. Why is that playing out? Because you are still carrying an identity of someone who thinks that they need to be fixed. You're carrying the identity of someone who thinks that somehow whatever they do is not good enough. That identity is fruit from the religious programming tree. You can do something about it. We are not coming here acknowledging these things, these signs, as a judgment on you. No, no, no. We are acknowledging so that we can alchemize. There's a reason why this platform is called Unleashed Alchemy. Let's go further. So, even when you have not harmed anybody, the self-interrogation commences. Okay? So, in this case, yes, if you have harmed someone with your words, with your actions, if you slap somebody, yeah, you have to accept the consequences. Yet at the same time, you don't live your life in chronic guilt and shame for that action. It has been rectified. You've taken accountability. Now it's time to move on. All right. Now we can get into very extreme cases, which I'm not going to do. Okay. But the self-interrogation comes from chronic guilt and shame that you were taught to take on from religion. How does this negatively impact your life? I said this already. You learn not to trust your intuition. You ignore your bodily sensations. It's difficult for you to make decisions because you don't allow yourself to know that you have wisdom that is encoded in your DNA. Do you understand that? There is wisdom that is encoded in your DNA for you to access for every single life experience, for every single decision that you would ever have to make in your life. wisdom encoded in your DNA, which means you can go internally to say, what's my next step? Religion doesn't teach you that. Religion teaches you automatically to go externally, to go outside of yourself, forget what you're feeling in your body, forget that knowing that is already there, forget about all of that. You can't trust that anymore. Because remember, you're broken. That's what religion says. But as a sovereign being, we know that is false. That is a false identity to live in chronic guilt and shame. That is a false identity to not trust your intuition. That in every single situation you are guided. That with every decision, you already know the solution is already there because you are the solution. So I'm going to repeat this. How does this negatively impact your life when you're constantly interrogating yourself? You don't trust your intuition. You ignore your bodily sensations. It's difficult for you to make decisions. And you don't allow yourself to speak exactly what you desire. So I want to touch on the last one a little bit more. You don't allow yourself to speak exactly what you desire. What does this have to do with guilt and shame? Because when you have, all of us, first of all, have a soul aligned vision that we come here with. The vision does not fall into any type of category because you are the category. It doesn't fall in line into any type of strategy because you are the strategy. Who you came here to be has never been before in the way that you came here to express it. However, if you are living with chronic guilt and shame, with any guilt and shame, you don't allow yourself to actually speak what you are imagining. You will tell yourself, you'll water it down. You'll start to self-interrogate with questions like, how is this going to happen? What are people going to say? What is my family going to say? How am I going to look to other people? Does this dream sound stupid? What other people are doing it? Do people need this? Do people want that? All of those questions. So because of that self-interrogation, then you'll start to water what you desire. You'll start to water it down. You'll start to make it sound more realistic instead of speaking it exactly the way that you see it. Because guilt and shame says, well, you may not be able to do that. You don't even know how. Or you need to fix this about you first before you do that. So, how do you get to a place where you are not interrogating yourself? How do you rewire that? How do you refocus? So I'm going to tell you what I did. I made a decision to be conscious of the thoughts and the questions that were roaming my mind when it came to me addressing how I felt about myself, because guilt and shame comes from internal. It's almost like an internal resentment, a self-resentment. So you have to get back to first, how do you feel about yourself? What are you telling yourself? How do you look? How do you literally look at yourself when you're looking in the mirror? What thoughts are going in your mind when you're looking at yourself? That's where it starts. And I had to make a conscious decision to pay attention to, first of all, paying attention to my body, how I was feeling about myself. What was I telling myself when I looked in the mirror? What was I telling myself when I was, say, introducing myself to another person? What was I telling myself when I was walking past people or walking through a crowd of people? What was I telling myself about myself? How do I speak about myself? Do I like myself? That's what you have to do. You have to make a decision to determine how you really view yourself. So I offer you that. It is a practice. And it's activating really a muscle that if you've never done that type of work, it is activating a muscle that you have never used. So I want you to try that during the most simplest, mundane activity in your life. It doesn't have to be this big thing. Okay? Here's a side note. We often push away things like that, practices like that, where you look in the mirror and you pay attention to what you're saying about yourself. We push those practices away because we don't view them as massive. We don't view them as big enough. If you've never looked in the mirror and paid attention to what you were telling yourself about yourself, if you've never said or asked the question or you allowed yourself to journal, how do I actually feel about myself? Do I really like myself? Do not underestimate the power that that activity has. Okay? So, again, try this during the most mundane daily task. Pay attention to what you're thinking about yourself. Is it empowering? Is it empowering? Are the thoughts that you're thinking toward yourself, is it full of pressure for you to have done something better? So, for example, I'll use a very simple, and I don't know why I keep using the example of introducing yourself to someone, but I'm going to stick with that example. So let's say you're introducing yourself to someone for the first time, okay? And after the interaction, or even during the interaction, you're telling yourself, oh, you should have said this better, or you should have said your name out loud, or you should have remembered the person's name, or maybe you should have dressed better for the occasion, blah, blah, blah. Or are the thoughts that you're thinking, or the questions that are coming to your mind, is it full of pressure for you to have done something better? For you to have done something that you think would have been better? So you introducing yourself to that person, are you saying, well, you could have done it better? Or you could have took the person's hand and held it stronger or squeezed it stronger when you were shaking their hand? This is how and that may sound silly, but this is how self-interrogation shows up. And I'm using simple examples to illustrate the point. So, what you're going to do from now on, this is a practice if you don't already do it. Look in the mirror. What are you telling yourself about what you see? Do you like yourself? Are you happy with yourself? Ask the questions out loud. Yes, you can write the questions out, but when you ask yourself questions that are about you, for you, the answers that come up, just let them be there. A lot of times we're afraid to do that because we intuitively know what's already going to show up for us. And that's when we start to get, the mind starts saying, well, you got laundry to do. Maybe you should do the dishes. Oh, you're thirsty. You need to go drink something real quick. Oh, you haven't drunk water all day. All these things that come up that are all of a sudden important when you decide to get quiet and ask those very empowering questions. Now, all of a sudden you want to do laundry. You pay attention to when that happens. So remember, this is a series that we're doing over the next few days, maybe 10 days. I don't know. We'll see. But this is a series. This is part one of how do you know when religious programming is still operating in your life, even after you have physically left the church. And you've read a few books about deconstruction of religion. You've read a few things about other spiritual practices, but you have to deal with the emotional and the identity part. And this is a part of it. So we'll sum up and say that self-interrogation, if you find yourself constantly interrogating yourself because there's still guilt and shame that is still lingering from religious programming, that is one way to know that you're still being negatively impacted by programming. All right. So I want you to stay tuned over the next few days so you can get the other ways to know that religious programming is still operating in your life. And if you want to go deeper with this work, there's several ways that you can work with me. You can hop into the program that starts June 7th. It is a 8-session live that I am teaching on this work, this identity work, okay, to rediscover your sovereign identity. All right. I know many people are asking, okay, I've left church, now what? I've gone through some of the deconstructing of religion. Now what? That's for you. All right. Get into that program. You can also work with me one-on-one. To do that, go to unleashedalchemy.com, book a call with me. I do have courses, individual courses that you can purchase. I also have books that you can purchase and download their ebooks that also help you through this identity, through rediscovering your sovereign identity so that you can live completely free, spiritually free, emotionally free, mentally free, physically free, financially free, dream free, complete and total liberation. All right. That is what I am about. So until next time,